Good morning, everybody. Today we shall be talking about the last unit that is prescribed to us, which is dealing with elegy. In English literature, an elegy is a poem of serious reflection, usually a lament for the dead. However, for all its preservativeness and pervasiveness, the elegy remains remarkably ill defined. Sometimes, elegy is used as a catch all to denominate texts of a somber or pessimistic tone. Sometimes elegy is used as a marker for textual monumentalizing and sometimes strictly as a sign of lament for the dead. So, three important distinctions are seen in the use of the word elegy. The Greek term elegia originally referred to any verse written in elegiac couplets and covering a wide range of subject matter like death, love, war, and so on. The term also included epitaphs, sad and mournful songs, and commemorative verses. The Latin term of elegy, and in Latin, the use of and the writing of elegy of an ancient Roman literature was most often erotic or mythological in nature. Because of its structural potential for rhetorical effects, the elegiac couplet was used by both the Greeks and the Roman poets for witty, humorous, and satirical subject matter. The classical examples that we could quote for elegies are, other than the epitaphs, could be of the ancient elegy as a poem of mourning, which would include Catullus, Carmen 101 on his dead brother. Number two, elegies by Propertius on his dead mistress Cynthia and a matriarch of the prominent Cornelian family. Number three, Ovid wrote elegies bemoaning his exile, which he likened to a death. In English literature, the more modern and restricted meaning of a lament for a departed beloved or tragic event has been current only since the 16th century. The broader concept was still employed by John Donne for his elegies written in the early 17th century. This looser concept is especially evident in the Old English Exeter book of circa 1000 CE, which contains a serious, meditative, and well known poems such as The Wanderer, The Seafarer, and The Wife's Lament. So, in these elegies, the narrators use the lyrical I in inverted commas, to describe their own personal and mournful experiences. They tell the story of the individual rather than the collective lore of his or her people as epic poetry seeks to tell. For Samuel Taylor Coleridge and others, the term had come to mean, in inverted commas, serious meditative poem. They opine that elegy is a form of poetry natural to the reflective mind. It may treat of any subject, but it must treat of no subject for itself, but always and exclusively with references to the poet. As he will feel regret for the past or desire for the future, so sorrow and love become the principal themes of the elegy. Elegy presents everything as lost and gone or absent and future. The European examples of the elegy are Thomas Gray's Elegy written in a country churchyard, published in 1750. In French language, perhaps the most famous elegy is Le Lac, published in 1820 by Alphonse de Lamartine. And in Germany, the most famous example of an elegy is Duino Elegies by Rainer Maria Rilke, published in 1922. And so, in classical literature, an elegy was simply any poem that is written in elegiac meter. By elegiac meter, we mean alternative lines of dactylic hexameter and pentameter, and was not restricted to any subject matter. Though some classical elegies were laments, many of them were love poems also. Essentially, there are two types of elegies: personal elegy and impersonal elegy. In a personal elegy, the poet laments the death of some close friend or relative. And in impersonal elegy, the poet grieves over human destiny or over some aspect of contemporary life and literature. The essential characteristic features of the elegy could be that number one, it is a type of lyric and focuses on expressing emotions or thoughts. Number two, it uses formal language and structure. Number three, it may mourn the passing of life and beauty or someone very dear to the speaker. Number four, it may explore questions about nature of life and death or immortality of soul. And number five, it may express the speaker's anger about death. The elements of a traditional elegy mirror three stages of loss in moving from grief to consolation. Number one, it has a lament where the speaker expresses grief and sorrow for the loss of a particular thing. Number two, he praises or admires the idealized dead. And number three, finally, the poet has got a consolation and solace. The dead one is not dead ultimately, but lives on in another world, is what is expressed. So, the popular elegies that we could find in English literature are Lycidas by John Milton, Elegy written in a country churchyard by Thomas Gray, written in 17th century. Milton writes it in 16th century. Gray writes it in 17th century. In Memoriam of Arthur Hallam by Alfred Lord Tennyson in the 19th century. O Captain, My Captain by Walt Whitman, an American poet. In Memory of W.B. Yeats by W.H. Auden, modern century, 20th century war poet. To an Athlete Dying Young by A.E. Housman. Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson, the American poet. Elegy on His Cat by Joachim de Boulet. Among the Tombs by Robert Bridges. Death Stands Above Me by Walter Savage Landor. Dirge with Music by Edna St. All these are very popular elegies of English literature. Thank you very much for being a part of this video that has introduced you to elegy as a form of literature. Bye for now and stay tuned for the next videos.